Welcome everyone to our event this morning Canadian time, this afternoon European time. On behalf of the Center for European Studies at Carleton University, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this conversation between the European Union ambassador to Canada and the Canadian ambassador to the European Union, titled Transatlantic Cooperation in an Uncertain World: What's Next for the CanadaEU Strategic Partnership. My name is Achim Hurrelmann, and I'm the co-director of the Center for European Studies, which has put together this event in close cooperation with the delegation of the European Union to Canada and with Global Affairs Canada. And we want to acknowledge as well that the Center for European Studies is receiving funding from the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union. This online event is organized from the beautiful campus of Carleton University in Ottawa, which is located on the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. The peoples of the Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory since time immemorial. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. In acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Nation, we recognize the historical oppression and dispossession of Indigenous peoples in what we now know as Canada. For this event, we are honored by the presence of two ambassadors whom I would like to briefly introduce. Ailish Campbell is the ambassador of Canada to the European Union, and she is joining us from Brussels. Before assuming her current position, she served as Canada's Chief Trade Commissioner, as well as in various other senior roles at Global Affairs Canada, Finance Canada, the Privy Council Office, and Industry Canada. Ambassador Campbell holds a doctorate in international relations and was named a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. Thanks for being with us today, Ambassador. And secondly, Melita Gabrič is ambassador of the European Union to Canada, based here in Ottawa. Previously, she served as the ambassador of Slovenia to Canada. She also held senior positions in Slovenia's public service and foreign service, including Director of Development Cooperation and Humanitarian Aid and Diplomatic Affairs Advisor to both the Prime Minister and the President of Slovenia. Ambassador Gabrič holds a PhD in international relations. The purpose of our event today is to take stock of the Canada-EU strategic partnership in 2022, a year in which we mark the 5th anniversary of the provisional application of two major Canada-EU agreements, the Strategic Partnership Agreement, SPA, and the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA. But of course, 2022 has also been a year that has brought serious new challenges that Canada and the EU must navigate bilaterally and in cooperation with their multilateral partners, most importantly, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So in this context, we look forward to the conversation between the two ambassadors. The event will be structured as follows. I will moderate a conversation between Ambassadors Campbell and Gabrič for about the first hour, and then we will address questions posed from the audience. To pose a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we will look at your question, try to group those that are thematically coherent if there are too many, and address them to the two ambassadors. So with that said, I would like to begin by giving both ambassadors the floor for some brief opening remarks, and we agreed that Ambassador Gabrič would go first for that.
Good morning and good afternoon, good day, everyone. It is great to be with you all and to be part of this transatlantic conversation, a very timely conversation indeed, with my counterpart and my good friend, Ambassador Campbell. Good to see you again, Ailish, and big thanks to you, Professor Hurrelmann, for your partnership and also for moderating this event. Also, thank you to colleagues in Global Affairs Canada for partnering on this fireside. First of all, I would like to make a comment regarding the future of transatlantic cooperation. So when we are talking about the future of our bond, it is important that we include the youth to hear the voices of the next generation that will live this future and that will also co-create this future. This year, 2022, in addition to what the professor mentioned in terms of our important strategic and economic agreements, is also a year we are marking fifth anniversary of these two strategic agreements in 2022. But we are also in Europe, we are marking the European Year of Youth. And the idea is to give more voice to the youth and shine a light on the importance of the youth to build a greener, more inclusive, more just, and of course, digital future. And so I'm particularly glad to have learned that we have with us today students from both sides of the Atlantic, which certainly bodes well for our strong transatlantic bond to continue and will be in good hands. As we mark the fifth anniversary of our strategic partnership, we also celebrate the singular partnership and friendship between the EU and Canada. This partnership has grown ever closer over the last years, including through the two crises. First, the COVID pandemic, and now the war against Ukraine. Si vous le me permettez, je dirais quelques mots en français. Alors, ces dernières années, notre amitié s'est encore renforcée. Alors que nous étions confrontés à la pandémie de COVID-19, l'Union européenne et ses États membres ont fait parvenir des vaccins au Canada pour aider les Canadiens les plus vulnérables, particulièrement au début de l'effort de vaccination. Et face à l'agression russe de l'Ukraine, nous prouvons de nouveau que l'Union européenne et le Canada sont des partenaires et des alliés privilégiés. And in the EU, we very much appreciate Canada for being such a steadfast friend and ally, and also for Canada's support and investment in European security. So the last point I want to make by way of introduction is that, well, in the view of the war against Ukraine, we are witnessing, and we are actually a part of geostrategic realignment, including of supply chains, where the idea of the so-called friendshoring is increasingly taking hold. And of course, this idea is basically to strengthen the resilience of supply chains by integrating these chains with reliable, trusted partners who share the same values, such as the rule of law, human rights, transparency, and certainly the EU and Canada democracy. The EU-Canada are such partners, and thus we have been looking into the possibility to enhance our cooperation in the field of energy, while simultaneously pursuing our transitions to net zero. And we also seek to increase our cooperation on other strategic assets, such as critical raw materials, which we also need for a green transition. And I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk more about this, but I just want to put it out right at the outset that, you know, despite everything that's going on, despite the brutal war, it is so important that we continue in our charted path towards net zero emissions, We see eye to eye with Canada and have been working together on this front as well. And I think it's very important that we continue to do so.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Gabrič. So, Ambassador Campbell, please.
First of all, a huge thank you to you and Carleton for hosting us. It's just fantastic to see you, and of course, Ambassador Gabrič, always wonderful to see you. A huge thanks as well to your teams, to the teams at the EU mission to Canada, at our own team here at the Canadian mission to the EU. And a special thanks to our headquarters, both in Brussels and Ottawa. There's a big team that makes this relationship work. And we've had some incredible meetings this year, most recently in March with Prime Minister Trudeau and President von der Leyen on the margins of other very important meetings at NATO. And of course, Minister Jolie was just recently here for her joint ministerial committee with High Representative and Vice President Borrell. So you've got two incredible teams working on this relationship, and I hope we'll talk more about this. I want to just make 4 quick points. First of all, the importance of having a structured, clear relationship. It's not just our economic partnership, CETA, which has proven itself incredibly resilient throughout the pandemic, a 30% increase in goods trade since the agreement was signed. We're going to be celebrating the 5th anniversary of that agreement, but also this incredibly important strategic partnership agreement, which I think we'll talk about more throughout the panel. Just creating a structure in a world of uncertainty means that Canada and the EU, and this is my second point, have an incredibly unique partnership. It's only a handful of countries that have this depth of relationship. Canada, as you know, having economic partnerships, of course, with North America, with Asia through the CPTPP, but also now with the EU. And to see on the EU side that Canada, amongst the closest partners of the EU, including, of course, Japan, Switzerland, the US, and others, having this really incredibly structured and unique relationship. So I hope we'll talk a little bit about some of the unique features of this relationship, including the more than 30 dialogues that we have. Third point, I think Ambassador Gabrič said it absolutely perfectly. This is a relationship that, it isn't just well structured. It's had to rise to incredible challenges over the last 2 years. And that's, of course, COVID, that's vaccine production and export and innovation on COVID-related treatments. That also includes the pandemic recovery. And now it includes Russia's war on the Ukraine and Ukrainian people, and how Canada and the EU, across a host of vectors, from humanitarian to military, into financial support for Ukraine, and the support directly, as I've said, on the military side in particular, both bilaterally, but also using a whole host of hybrid related tools on disinformation and cyber warfare. We've never seen, I think, a faster, deeper, more agile use of, and I did just say agile. When I talked about the European Union, this is an institution that has more than risen to the occasion, just as the Canada-EU partnership has risen to the occasion despite the difficult circumstances. And if we have any students from Ukraine joining us today, a very special welcome to them. And finally, and I think we'll talk more about this during the panel, the importance of Canada and the EU taking their partnership to the multilateral system, where we are like-minded, where we work on the rule of law, and where one of the biggest challenges we have in front of us right now, food insecurity and instability, we're only going to be able to address together. So really looking forward to the conversation for me this afternoon. I think it's still the morning there in Canada.
Yeah, great, thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. So both of you have already mentioned the strategic partnership agreement, and that was really the starting point when we started planning this conversation, that this agreement is celebrating this 5th year anniversary this spring, 5 years of provisional application of the strategic partnership agreement. It's not super well known. So maybe Ambassador Gabrič, could you talk about why it's an important agreement and what there is really to celebrate about this 5-year anniversary?
Yeah, well, the SPA is important because it provides this framework, an organizational principle, if you will, a structure, as Ambassador Campbell just mentioned, for our cooperation. It is actually this institutional architecture that enables that our relations grow ever closer, that are ever more multi-layered, multifaceted, and it's basically like the CETA agreement that you, Professor, mentioned already, and also Ambassador Campbell referred to as the CETA agreement, which is also a very important part of our relations. Did on the trade and economic side, the SPA, our strategic partnership agreement, has helped us to establish a robust political cooperation. And perhaps, you know, as you say, the SPA is not well known, so perhaps it would be useful to say a few words about how it works in practical terms. Now, the SPA helps our cooperation through the so-called dialogues, the high-level dialogues. And these dialogues are basically meetings between officials in their respective fields of competence. And these dialogues are structured, that's important, and are held more or less regularly. Now we have a large number of dialogues. Ambassador Campbell mentioned 30. Yes, this is really a large number. And these dialogues are ranging from climate change, energy, human rights, security. You know, we have geographic dialogues. We have a dialogue on UN coordination, on sanctions, and so forth. Now, through these dialogues, we exchange positions, share good practices, start joint initiatives, joint projects. So in addition to these dialogues, the SPA also institutionalized and introduced regular coordination at higher levels with meetings like the Joint Ministerial Committee meeting, Leaders Summit. So Ambassador Campbell already mentioned this important meeting that took place 2 weeks ago in Brussels. The so-called JMC, the Joint Ministerial Meeting, that was chaired by High Representative and Vice President Borrell and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada, Madame Joly. Well, if I say, in this meeting is of course very important because it charts the course of our relations for the next period, let's say. And I would say that the most important thing that meeting confirmed was that our relations are excellent and they are resilient during this strategically very important period. Of course, not surprisingly, the meeting was focused on our response to Russia's war in Ukraine, and in particular, it was agreed that it is the utmost importance that we continue our coordination on sanctions, on financial and military support to Ukraine, humanitarian assistance, demining, of course, accountability, and also fighting disinformation. The last thing I would mention from this JMC, from this meeting, is that one thing that was highlighted in terms of the future development of our relations between the EU and Canada is the field of energy and food security and the supply chains for critical minerals and metals. And so we are talking here about upping our cooperation, the EU-Canada cooperation, but also helping with food security and the energy-related challenges in critical minerals and metals supply chains for other countries. Another thing that is also very important, and I think it's going to figure prominently in the times to come, is our cooperation in security, crisis management, on conflict prevention, mediation, women, peace and security, and of course, in view of the strengthened role that the EU is having and developing in security area, the importance of the EU-NATO partnership was also very much emphasized. So in short, the SPA is the umbrella under which these multi-layer dialogues and meetings take place. And it is actually crucial for our cooperation, especially as it was shown, it showed its utility in a time of crisis, such as was the pandemic and such as is the Russian war against Ukraine.
Thank you very much. The recent meeting of the Joint Ministerial Committee has already been mentioned, and maybe I want to ask Ambassador Campbell as well, from your perspective, from the Canadian perspective, what were the most important outcomes of last month's meeting of the Joint Ministerial Committee, which, as was mentioned, brings together the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and the Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister?
Sure. I think it was incredibly important, first and foremost, that we made the time for this meeting, that the importance of the relationship, it's friendship takes care in feeding, and the structure of the dialogues that Ambassador Gabrič described, I mean, it really can't be underestimated, the depth and breadth of dialogues that are happening across a whole host of departments. Most of them are led at the senior official level. So what's really important is that we have ministers who are willing to dedicate the time and attention to the relationship, to put what I would call the capstone on the discussions every few years. And importantly, this JMC talked not only about the, I would say, great innovations in crisis management and cooperation, including on financial support to Ukraine. Obviously, the civilian side of this relationship is where Melita and I spend our time. And of course, Canada has an incredibly robust defense and security related series of relationships, headed in our case, of course, with our team at NATO, as well as with NORAD and D&D. So just to focus on the civilian elements of that, just the unrelenting support, and Ambassador Gabrič mentioned, of course, not only the humanitarian side, where Canada has been very active in supporting Ukraine refugees. We've just had our first flights out to Canada. We will do whatever it takes to support. And here I also want to mention the member states. We have relationships with 27 member states, Poland, Romania, and others who've done such an unbelievable job hosting refugees. And at the JMC, ministers talked about that. I think one of the great innovations of this JMC this year is that we proposed to High Representative and Vice President Hurrell that as he hosts this meeting, he also invite the foreign ministers of the 27 member states. So we were thrilled to have, at one point, I think over 16 foreign ministers with us for discussions. And then in the afternoon, Minister Joly also appeared at the Foreign Affairs Council, which is, of course, in and of itself an only EU 27 meeting. And they kind of can break and create interesting aspects of the agenda in order to hear from others. And I think it's incredibly significant that we also take note of the fact that ministers said we can't imagine having a conversation that feels more aligned, more like-minded than with Canada. And that came out at both our JMC and the Foreign Affairs Council. What that means is that we've got the formal statements, which are incredibly important. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also say that President Lisa Campbell of the Canadian Space Agency was in town that day, and we signed an unprecedented brand new civilian space agreement with the EU on the civilian side. So like every day is a new adventure. In this case, it was just also fantastic to see that the relationships were there. And I think Representative and Vice President Burrell, but as well, I think incredibly significant that the foreign ministers themselves took the time to attend. And we're talking about how the Canada-EU relationship also sits on 27 bilateral relationships with member states and the constant dynamism. But, you know, as we talked about, complexity that brings. So I hope that's a little bit of the flavor that we had a month ago. And as I say, let's make sure we put in the link in the Q&A or in the chat function, a link to our joint ministerial committee statement, because I think once you and those who have joined us dig into it, you'll just see the incredible richness of the discussion that we had about a month ago.
Great, thank you very much. So let's move specifically to the impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which obviously has already been mentioned a number of times. And for this question, I would like to start with Ambassador Campbell and ask, from Canada's perspective, how has this Russian war in Ukraine impacted the relationship with the European Union? Also, of course, in the context, for instance, of Canada's relationship with the United States, with NATO, and so on. How important is the EU in responding to the Russian invasion of Ukraine when it comes to Canadian foreign policy?
Sure. Well, I mean, of course, first and foremost, we have an incredibly strong bilateral relationship with Ukraine, and Prime Minister Trudeau and President Zelensky are long-time compatriots and exchanging telephone calls and even visits. Of course, we hosted President Zelensky. The Prime Minister was able to host him in Toronto. We have an incredibly vibrant and active Ukrainian diaspora in Canada of 1.5 million Ukrainians. I think what this meant is that we've constantly been listening to Ukraine, in particular since the 2014 invasion of Crimea. And I also want to highlight our Operation Unifier, which helped to train over 30,000 Ukrainian military members in cooperation with partners that include Poland, Sweden, Denmark, and the United States and the United Kingdom. So there's a relationship here that's incredibly deep and profound. And of course, when Russia illegally invaded Ukraine, there was a security and defense focus, a bilateral one that we can, of course, talk about, but also a strong NATO defense response. And then on the EU side, and I'm sure Ambassador Gabrič will talk about this, just an incredible number of policy innovations and tools came into effect. Where Canada and the EU have been most robust, in fact, in cooperating is on sanctions. There's been an unprecedented, as I say, on the civilian side. So there's been an unprecedented series of meetings in order to align, in Canada's case, a rolling package of individual listings, economic sanctions, total embargo on all forms of Russian energy. We've worked in cooperation with the EU on de-SWIFTing various financial institutions. On the EU side, an unprecedented amount of activity to get through what has now just recently been blessed as the 6th package of sanctions. But keeping that aligned, and here I also want to recognize our G7 colleagues who've been helping to coordinate, because of course, those sanctions also include partners like Japan, Singapore, and others. The work at the United Nations to resoundingly condemn these actions, to activate, of course, criminal-related investigations, to bring forward war crimes. And I'll just end on the humanitarian piece of this. There have been huge human migrations due to climate change, due to war. I think we need to recognize the work of the EU, for example, in helping to combat food insecurity related to climate in the Sahel and across Africa, in Ethiopia and other locations. Canada, of course, working strongly and resolutely with South American partners on the huge number of human migrants that have resulted out of the political crises and military crises in Venezuela, Ukraine is the latest. And seeing 7 million Ukrainians flee, mostly women and children, of course, and seek shelter, and to see the EU respond. And I think sometimes it's easier for partners to say this than the EU, because if the EU says it, maybe it sounds like a talking point. But let me say it, the invocation of the Temporary Protection Directive, and to see the EU, without missing a beat, immediately respond, provide shelter, provide healthcare. I mean, it was just so totally inspiring. And of course, Canada will be there every step of the way to assist on the humanitarian aspects of this crisis. I hope that gives a little bit of the flavor, but of course, this is not over. And I think all of us on this call should rededicate ourselves to being ready for this to be quite a long effort. And I don't think we should underestimate that Ukrainians themselves absolutely see themselves oriented towards the stars that you see behind Ambassador Gabrič, oriented towards Western values, diversity and equity, and towards the European Union as part of their future. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So, Ambassador Gabrič, Ailish Campbell has already praised the EU's response to the situation in Ukraine and the war and the Russian invasion. Maybe you can speak to that as well a little bit. And one question that I had is what this means, what the war, the EU's response, but also looking forward a bit, what does this mean for the development of the EU's common foreign and security policy and common security and defense policy? A year ago, we would perhaps have discussed strategic autonomy of the European Union from the United States. Now it seems this invasion has put more of a spotlight on NATO again. So where do you see in this context the development of the external and defense capacity of the European Union?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a very good question. Now, in order to answer this question, I would start by describing how the EU reacted to this unprovoked, completely unjustifiable, destructive, brutal war against sovereign, independent Ukraine. As you know, and as our audience is well aware, we responded quickly, and we responded first of all by putting in place unprecedented sanctions against Russia. And not just that, that's on the one hand. On the other hand, the EU and its member states are also undertaking unprecedented actions to support Ukraine. Now, and we are doing this, I would like to emphasize this, in unanimity within the EU, among all 27 member states, and in close cooperation with our partners, very importantly with Canada and with other transatlantic partners. I think that our response actually made the European Union stronger, and it developed, and also our transatlantic relations are stronger against expectations by many, or we have pulled together both within the EU and with our partners in an unprecedented way. Now, of course, in terms of our security and foreign policy aspect of the EU, what is important here is, among other things, what we did was, for the first time in history, the EU is actually providing weaponry to Ukraine, to a country that is under assault. We are doing this through this European Peace Facility, which basically means that the EU is financing, whereas member states are providing the actual weapons to help Ukraine defend itself. Certainly, our aspiration, our action plan, our strategy, strategic compass is already being translated into action. And I think that in the longer term, in perspective, what we are doing now is really going to strengthen our security and defense dimension. And of course, you mentioned NATO, Ambassador Campbell mentioned NATO. Of course, we are working closely to make sure that while we are working on our capacities in these areas, we are doing so in a way that will mutually reinforce NATO capabilities with the EU capabilities. Now, another thing that I would like to mention in this regard, in the regard of our response to the war in Ukraine, is that, and that is also very pertinent to our relationship with Canada, is that we are, of course, trying through sanctions, and as Ambassador Campbell mentioned, we have been working together, coordinating our action, our sanctions. Through these sanctions, we want to deprive Russia of its financial means to wage the war, of course. And an important part of this goal of this intent is for the EU to phase out our dependency on Russian gas and oil altogether. That's the idea. And now we have, with the sixth package of sanctions that was just agreed upon a couple of days ago, now we have a plan to ban 90% of the oil imports to the EU by the end of this year. You know, while the European Union is has a rather complicated structure, obviously because we have 27 member states, so the decision-making processes can take some time. Also, the sanctions are all decided upon in unanimity, which sometimes takes time. But I think that as all the packages of sanctions so far reaffirmed, is that there is really you know, unity within the EU on the issue of defending Ukraine, its sovereignty, but also defending what Ambassador Campbell was also referring to, our shared values.
Great, thank you very much. Ambassador Campbell, Ambassador Gabrič has mentioned obviously the EU's dependency on Russian energy. There have also been concerns about some food security issues because of the war, because of grain produced in Ukraine and so on. Is Canada a partner who can help the Europeans in that context, or is that unrealistic given the distance and also, for instance, the lack of export capacities in Canada for liquefied natural gas and so on? Where do you see potential for Canada-EU cooperation to address some of these concerns and issues?
Sure. I mean, and I think there's probably 3 or 4 key points. The first and foremost is obviously on constant innovation and technology, where we are sharing renewable, clean technologies consistently and constantly, whether that's improving, for example, the energy efficiency of a household, or I mean, I think you know, the whole world should know really about the reduction of the carbon footprint per barrel of oil in the oil sands in Alberta and in our oil producing regions is absolutely got an incredible amount of EU technology in it. And we are, of course, a global hydro superpower in the sense of exporting our hydroelectric capacity through Hydro-Quebec and Manitoba Hydro around the world. So, I mean, there's just whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's at the household level, I mean, there is just constant innovation on meeting our climate objectives. As you know, Canada and the EU are amongst the only entities in the world, and we want to increase this, applying a pan-economic carbon price, but also who have committed to legally binding climate commitment. So that innovation and technology piece should be underestimated. Secondly, I would say on LNG, let's look at the success of LNG Canada. The recipe in there includes long-term contracts. So we have Petronas out of Malaysia, Corgas out of Korea, and of course, Japan involved and other subscribers in that project who've made long-term energy commitments. There is nothing stopping us with the right environmental assessments, with the right commitments from the federal and provincial governments, and our work on Indigenous consultation and participation to expand LNG-related energy exporting capacity. It will need a partner. It will need a customer, if you will, on the other side. So those are the kinds of questions that are happening right now. And does it make sense for Canada, for example, to offer its LNG to the EU? And those are very active discussions with member states. I think it shouldn't be underestimated, third point, that of course we are sending incremental hydrocarbons south. So under our climate action plan, we are able to increase production, and we're able to ship that on existing pipelines to the United States, which then frees up US capacity to export to the EU. So there's a whole energy system happening here. And I think, of course, that's at the heart of, for example, Prime Minister Trudeau and President von der Leyen just the latest LNG and green transition, which of course is about LNG to hydrogen. Meeting in March, and so that's the latest dialogue that will be occurring. We also have a high-level energy dialogue, and of course, Canada was thrilled to host the MOCA, the ministerial meeting on climate action, with over 30 participating countries in Stockholm just yesterday. So the cooperation is constant, and I don't think we should underestimate having been a part of the team at Finance Canada working on the pan-Canadian carbon pricing and seeing the climate action plan come into place and now seeing legally binding targets. Canada's really moved the yardsticks in the past few years, and we shouldn't underestimate that it's each and every one of us individually at the household in levels that are going to have to make commitments in order to meet these challenges. The EU having an unprecedented challenge right now, trying to move so quickly. I'm not sure if you've heard already this morning, there's been another threat of turning off Danish gas from Russian supply. These conversations couldn't be more important, and they're happening at all kinds of levels, including both nationally and with the EU.
Thank you very much. One last question on this topic, and again, I want to invite the participants to ask their questions in the Q&A. We will get to them at the end. Ambassador Gabrič, what does the war in Ukraine mean for the EU and Canada's cooperation with China? Is it now more important to work with China despite all of the challenges, differences on human rights and so on, because there's a danger of China and Russia forming essentially an alliance against the West?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. My answer would be that yes, it is important to work with China, but it is also our expectation that China will behave as a responsible actor in international relations. China has ambition and it is positioning itself as a leader. And as a leader, one of the leaders in international relations, it has the responsibility to act in keeping with the international law, where, of course, the principles of the prohibition of the use of force is an aggression against another country, sovereign country, is one of the cornerstones of the international law and an international legal system. Of course, we've seen that we had the EU had the summit with China not that long ago, and during this summit, these expectations were conveyed, and we certainly hope for constructive cooperation with China.
Okay, let's move to the other agreement that was already mentioned between Canada and the European Union, a little bit more well-known than the Strategic Partnership Agreement, and that is CETA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, which was also has also been implemented provisionally since 2017. Trade statistics show that CETA has been quite successful in that it has resulted in robust growth in bilateral merchandise trade. Figures I received, that's the privilege of working on an event together with the EU delegation in Canada and the Canadian mission in Brussels, that you get easily access to the latest figures. So what they told me is that in 2021, Canada-EU bilateral merchandise trade reached 68.8 billion euros, which is 31% above 2016 levels. So in that sense, there has been a positive effect of CETA. And here, let's begin with Ambassador Gabrič this time. What do you see as the next steps in sort of further filling this agreement with life and making sure that it continues to deliver for both partners?
Yeah, no, the statistics that you just quoted is certainly very positive, and we hope for the continuation, and we are quite certain that we will see continuation of this trend of the increase in trade. I would just like to say that CETA is a comprehensive agreement, not just in terms of its size. It actually has 1,634 pages, but also in terms of areas it covers. It is a progressive agreement. It goes beyond the lowering of tariffs and the removal of barriers, and provides the framework for green transition, improved gender equality, labor rights. A lot of emphasis is also on SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. Now, the challenges that we see is, first of all, companies are not necessarily aware of CETA and of what CETA can offer. So one thing that we've been very much focused on is actually, spreading information, informing companies. We, for example, have, sectoral business guides posted online. We are hosting all kinds of webinars, including one that's coming in September, to make businesses on both sides of the Atlantic aware of CETA and the advantages that it offers. And of course, another challenge that is kind of specific to Canadian market is that, well, the EU is obviously it's a party that consists of 27 member states. It has one single market. Even though it's not one country, it has a single market, whereas Canada is one country, yet it has different provincial regulations. So this can sometimes be confusing for Canadian companies, especially smaller ones. But I would say that governments on both sides are making big efforts to inform companies about the internal market or the regulations in respective markets. We have, well, this is done on the Canadian side through the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service. We on our side have the EU Enterprise Europe Network, also with an office in Edmonton. And I would like to mention this CETA Regulatory Cooperation Forum, which is basically a place where companies can raise issues that relate to regulations or differences in regulation, so that that these differences can be negotiated in order to make the regulations more compatible, let's say. And you know, I don't know if we have some audience, some people in the audience from the business sector, but certainly both sides are very happy if stakeholders bring issues of regulation or differences in regulation to this cooperation forum. And down the road, we see, I would say we are very optimistic about how CETA will continue to provide a basis for enhancing the business cooperation trade, also because of the challenges that we both face. Climate change is a challenge, but is also an issue that both the EU and Canada are tackling, where we are both ambitious in terms of our climate action. So actually, we see here quite some space for furthering our cooperation on, for example, innovative green solutions, technologies. And I would also say that the war against Ukraine opens new opportunities for Canada to export to the EU using CETA. Especially this would be true for raw materials and perhaps potentially also in terms of energy.
Great, thank you. Ambassador Campbell, I'd like you to address this question as well, and maybe sort of you could touch upon two points. The first is, according to statistics, at least that I have seen, it seems that the growth of European trade to Canada has been larger than the growth of Canadian trade to the EU. So what does that, how can Canadian policy help to equal out this relationship a little bit more? And secondly, lots of Canadian companies doing business with Europe used to do that through the United Kingdom, which obviously now is no longer a member state of the European Union. What impact has that had on Canadian businesses' use of CETA? Maybe you can sort of build these aspects into your response on the challenges of continuing to make a good use and implement this agreement.
Sure, happy to. You know, it's one thing to negotiate a deal, and we do have some incredible negotiators on both sides of the Atlantic, but they have to be informed by consumers. They have to be informed by labor and environment groups, and of course by business who make this relationship real. So we've seen trade, two-way trade increase. We've seen, this is a bit geeky, but this is you know, how you measure the success of an agreement. We've seen small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as large enterprises, use the provisions of this preferential trade deal in their actual customs applications. So if you had perfect coverage, 100% of businesses would be using CETA, where there was a preferential benefit. We're at about 60% of businesses. That actually is, you know, it took NAFTA over 10 years or more to get to that, what we call utilization of preferences rate. So let's keep working on that. And I think that's what Ambassador Gabrič talked about. Really important that we inform businesses, and particularly small businesses, the Trade Commissioner Service, Export Development Canada, Business Development Canada, they're all working hard to get the word out, but it matters when businesses talk to business. So we'll keep reaching out, especially as we see an increase in thousands of new exporters, many of whom are small or even micro enterprises, sometimes selling only one product and sometimes selling it to a limited number of markets, which doesn't necessarily always make it time efficient for them to dig into trade deals. So we have to, I think, use some digital tools, and we're working with the Commission on how we kind of not only just demystify, but create easier tools, software, platforms, and information that makes it much faster for micro and small businesses to access these preferences. Listen, we don't just look at the Canada-EU relationship, we look at Canada's global trading value proposition. So the fact that the EU has a surplus with Canada means that there are fantastic EU products that Canadian consumers want to buy. We have trade surpluses in other relationships. So the whole point would be the competitive dynamic, the prices, the products, and the effectiveness of supply chains that Canadians have access to, and then boosting their ability to export abroad, to remain competitive, and to continue to innovate and provide the kinds of products that consumers want. So I would only challenge you insofar as, evaluating the effectiveness of a relationship sometimes means, and I'll give you another example, one of the reasons the EU had a trade surplus with us in 2021 is because Canada bought, and we were incredibly pleased to do so, millions of dollars worth of mRNA vaccines from Pfizer, from their plant located about 45 minutes from my office in Perth, Belgium. I mean, we were thrilled with that import. So let's dig into some of those numbers and demystify. And on the UK, listen, I think this has made the Canada-EU relationship all the more dynamic. I think we really found it easy to work with the UK, and we continue to have a fantastic trading and FDI relationship with the UK. Now we've had to, if you will, not rely on that, frankly, really long-standing relationship. We've had to deepen our engagement with France, with Germany, with Spain, with Poland, with all 27 member states. That's actually created a whole new range of relationships and innovations. We've had to, of course, reach out to Canadians to make sure they understand what the value added of having an EU location is. I'd flag my mother's own hometown of Dublin, Ireland, is just having exponentially grown on the FDI side, being the last English-speaking country remaining inside the EU. So we're just seeing new relationships develop. But that interoperability piece that I talked about earlier, the fact that Canada is a G7 country, has trade deals with all the other G7 countries, and more importantly, I think the civil society, business partnerships, and an understanding of supply chains and our commonly held rule of law and democratic values, that interoperability, of course, applies to our relationship with the UK. The last thing I might say is we're also very deeply committed to peace in Northern Ireland. Canada, General de Chastelain was involved in the decommissioning of arms in Northern Ireland. We are huge supporters of the Good Friday Agreement. So we're also very supportive of using civilian, sometimes it sounds boring, technocratic tools, but the alternative, which we've seen, and which has driven waves of immigrants to Canada seeking peace, we don't want to see, of course, things solved in any other way other than sitting down, using diplomacy, and we're going to continue to be deeply committed to both the UK and the EU relationship. I think we're 2 days away from the Queen's Jubilee. So talk about a record of public service. Very inspiring.
One quick follow-up for you, Ambassador Campbell. The agreement, of course, both agreements, actually, the SPA and the CETA are currently only provisionally applied because they haven't been ratified by all of the EU member states. For CETA, 12 of 27 member states still have not ratified, and that includes heavyweights like Germany, France, and Italy, and so on. Is that a concern for Canada? Does that sort of cast some doubt over the agreement?
Absolutely not. I'll say two things. First of all, we're very pleased with the provisional in force agreement. And the second part I'll say is, well, I've done homework on my side. So Canada's got the deal fully in place and ready to ratify. So I actually think that question is better directed to Ambassador Gabrič and the Commission's plan to encourage member states to ratify.
Okay, Ambassador Gabrič, can the Commission do very much here?
The important fact is that around 98% of the agreement is actually in force. It is in effect. So that's why it's producing such good results. Now, it is possible that the situation we find ourselves in and this, let's say, strategic realignment may have impact on the thinking of member states who did not ratify the agreement yet to do so. But I would also mention that some of those so-called irritants are quite important for some member states that have reservations and that did not ratify the agreement because of the sometimes really quite symbolic value of those irritants, let's say. So certainly it is also very important that we continue the conversation, our dialogue on how to improve the actual application of CETA.
Thank you to Ambassador Campbell in Brussels and Ambassador Gabrič in Ottawa for this interesting conversation. Thanks to our audience for participating in this event. Obviously, for me personally, as an EU and Canadian citizen, this cooperation is very close to my own heart. So it's good to see it in such good hands. Thank you very much for your participation, and good luck for the next steps of the relationship. And we'll be different people in charge in 5 years, but we'll try to do it again at that point and see where we are at in the bilateral relationship. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day.